Let me begin with the chief economist at FAO, Maximo Terrero. Sir, how do we ensure that we manage trade-offs and avoid unintended consequences related to a transition to regenerative food systems? What is needed from the stakeholders to support scaling such solutions?
Thank you very much, Jay, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think understanding the existence of trade-offs is the first issue that I think is extremely important. And working with farmers is central on this. Why? Because as you correctly said at the beginning, normally we try to implement solutions, and in this case, regenerative solutions. We're trying to recover the ecosystem and the nature over which we are trying to do crop intensification, for example, to produce more to reduce hunger. But we not necessarily are responding to the real needs of the problem and the challenge we're facing in the field. And we sometimes make farmers make decisions which not necessarily are correct. And farmers normally will, especially smallholders, have a huge budget constraint. So any wrongdoing in terms of what we tell them to do could create a consequence. So my first thing will be to understand that to achieve a goal, you will create trade-offs, and trade-offs could be on soil, water, energy, land. It could be on biodiversity, more emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and even land and income inequality. Understanding those and measuring those will allow us to choose what is the correct pathway over which we need to move. So what is the correct set of decisions that we need to move to be able to make it achieve the objective with the lower trade-offs behind those. So that would be, for me, the first recommendation. The second recommendation is to understand the science and the science behind of what is needed to minimize those trade-offs once we know what they are. And that science requires to understand, for example, soil characteristics, requires to understand what are the consequences. And there was a very nice presentation about nitrogen and soil maps and the importance of soil maps in those ecosystems. It's really important to understand what are the micronutrients missing in the soils so that the solutions are trying to resolve the problem rather than to creating standardized packages and scaling up standardized practices that not necessarily will respond to the reality of the area that we are working with. That's central, to be able to have that match between the real problem and the solutions to that problem. And finally, and I stop there, Ajay, is cost effectiveness. I think for farmers, bringing solutions to them needs to be cost effective and needs to be a business case behind what we're trying to do. And if there is no business case and there is a sustainability aim behind it, then we need to find the mechanism and the incentives for them to assume that is additional cost. But that's sometimes things that we don't take into consideration, and we make farmers make decisions that will lower the yields, for example, will lower the revenue, and therefore they are not sustainable. So we need to carefully assess those so that we can bring the solutions as needed. Thank you very much.
Maximo, I'll just ask you the first question. What is the role of technology and innovation that can play to transition to regenerative food systems?
Oh, I think there is no doubt that we need science, technology, and innovation to transform the agri-food systems, and of course, regenerative agri-food systems transformation. And technological innovation and adoption are essential to generate win-win solutions along the triple bottom line of sustainability, economic, environmental, and social. And technological innovations can be applied to support regenerative food system development across the chains from production to consumption, bringing high-yielding varieties and production methods that protect the soil and sequester carbon, water, efficient food processing methods, recyclable packaging materials, novel solutions to reduce emissions in the food supply chain, and methods to collect excess of food and reduce food waste and losses across the production. And for that, we can use digital technologies like the Internet of Things, blockchain, artificial intelligence, and there is a lot of work being done in that topic. And can also be applied to increase the efficiency of sustainability operations. But technologies can in themselves help ensure the triple burden of sustainability? I don't think so. I think that we need something else. And there are two other things that we look very carefully in FAO. One is data and real-time data, and that is very linked to what it was mentioned before, because the only way we're going to be transparent in this process is if we provide real-time data and data to the farmers as well as to the consumers, to assure that things are moving in the correct direction. And the problem we observe is that that's not necessarily the case. We don't have the information available, and in many cases, we have a market structure in the agricultural sector which is highly concentrated, meaning very big few companies control significant amount of this technology and innovation. And as a result of that, they also control the data. And here is where I want to underscore the importance of the third element. So it's not only technology, innovation, and data, but there is a third element that normally we don't take into consideration, which is institutions and innovation institutions that we need to have in place to assure that whatever technology and innovation brings is also inclusive. And we call them complements, which are basically governance institutions and human capital. Why? Because human capital can also be a barrier of entry, can also be a mechanism of exclusion that won't allow farmers to benefit from these technologies in an inclusive way. Now, how to set up these institutional arrangements or regulatory arrangements that are needed to minimize the potential concentration or bigger concentration of technology and of information is central, and we need to leapfrog. We need to learn from countries that have already done this, and we need to find ways in which we can do it so that we avoid capture. And that's something that could be at the regional level, could allow us to have some institutional innovations that will help countries which are not so strong right now in terms of institutionality to have a mechanism where they can allow the use of science, technology, and innovation and data in an inclusive way. So the three elements for us are central: innovation and technology based on science, data, real-time data, but institutions or complements that will assure that these are inclusive. It could be that I will slow the pace at which we can move in acceleration of technology, innovation, and data, but it also assures that in the future it's sustainable. And that's extremely important, especially for farmers, because sometimes, especially when they are smallholders, they are atomized, and it's very difficult for them to have the economies of scale to benefit from these technologies. Thank you, Jay.